There we go. I'm live on TikTok and I'm live on Facebook, and I'm also live on YouTube because I'm on StreamYard and I'm fancy. Fancy like that. I don't know what the hell I'm doing still. I've been trying to figure out how to do this type of stuff. I need help, but anyway, I'm figuring it out little by little. I'm here, all right, and it is what it is, all right. So I was at the Diddy trial today, and I was at the Diddy trial today. Let's try to see if I can get rid of this stuff over here. All right, here we go. And it was interesting. Um, I've been there several times since it started, and I feel like my emotions have gone up and down ever since the beginning of this. It's all over the place. Every week, it's like it could go either way. Okay. Today was no less crazy than any other day. Um, they started about 50 minutes late today. All right. They started about 50 minutes late today. And I noticed they've kind of been late a lot recently, for whatever reasons, but they definitely did start late today. But finally they got going. And Maureen Comey wanted to enter some exhibits with a pseudonym order. All right. Now, remember, Jane Doe, who was one of the witnesses in this case, she was testifying under a pseudonym. Okay. So going forward, there's still going to be other, things that she, not she, but other exhibits and stuff like that that are going to be entered that have that pseudonym. All right. I'm trying to see if I see, I know there's people elsewhere. I'm trying to see if I can see. Let me see. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. All. Want to make sure that I can see everybody's comment. All right. All right. So that's that. So the judge did say yes, that they could do that, because how I know that is because throughout the course of the testimony, there were exhibits and stuff like that where we weren't able to see specific exhibits in the overflow room that didn't have the pseudonym redacted. Okay. So Maureen Comey says, I'm sorry, not Maureen Comey, Smizer says, before the witness comes in, we would like to introduce these text messages involving KK. And there are a couple of text messages that Puff has sent to KK. One of them was, make sure Robin pays her rent. So as you know, Jane Doe was having her rent paid by Diddy. And KK sends a text message and says that Robin says her rent was paid. Okay. Okay, so there's another message where it says 3 of my doors are broken. This is crazy. And D Rock says, oh, he's coming to the house. He just texted me. And D Rock tells Jane Doe, I don't think it's a good idea to leave your place. That's not going to make anything better. And Jane Doe says to him, he has my key. I don't feel safe. The key is a blue fuzzy tail. Just take it. And D Rock is like, girl, I'm at the house. Puff is here. You know I can't take your keys. Okay. So apparently it was a situation where Diddy had her keys, and she wanted D Rock to get the keys from him, and that he couldn't do anything like that. Okay. So this was just a little bit of stuff that happened before the first witness took the stand. All right. And remember, those are exhibits that the government wants to put into evidence. Okay. All right. So the government calls his first witness, and this is Special Agent Andre Lamont, and he's with Homeland Security. And Smizer asks, where do you work? Homeland Security in LA. And he works in the human trafficking unit. And they asked him, did you search 200 South Mapleton Drive? He says yes. All right. So he's one of the agents that went and raided Diddy's home. Okay. they asked, the government asked, how many manila envelopes did you find? And he said 6. And they asked what was written on them. And it was the letter K was written on them. And testing confirmed that on the envelopes that were marked K, and there was apparently a shamrock on the envelope in addition to the K, and it was ketamine. All right. So the assistant U.S. attorney says, we move to enter into evidence these exhibits, and Agnifilo says objection. And so there's a sidebar. All right. So they had the sidebar for a little bit, and she asks, are you familiar with different types of guns? And he says yes. And they show a variety of different exhibits with a whole lot of different firearms. All right. One of the firearms is a Ruger. Another one is a rifle. Another one is a pistol. And there's also a photo of a Glock, and another rifle, and a ton of ammunition and magazines. Okay. There's also a photo of a pump action shotgun. There's 2 rifles, just a whole bunch of firearms. And it's, I understand, he's a celebrity and stuff like that. And he, has reason to have all of these firearms. But it's just so weird to see all this, right? So I wrote in my notes, why did he need all this ish, right? But anyway, it is what it is. So he had they showed he had an actual firearm in his hand that was found there, and there was a zip tie on the firearm. And I guess they just wanted to show what one of the firearms looked like in person. And there was actually a zip tie. There was a zip tie that was on the firearm. And the attorney asked, what is this? Oh God, here we go. All right. So my thing is restricted. So I'm about to get like a whole two viewers here on TikTok, which is annoying, but it is what it is. I'm just going to keep on going. Okay. Oh my God, that's so annoying. They're so strict on TikTok. It's just really, really annoying. It's so annoying. Oh God. Anyway. All right. So there was a zip tie that was on the firearm. Okay. And the zip tie was there. So, no one accidentally does anything with the firearm. Okay. The zip tie is there to kind of like block the firearm from like really being loaded and whatever. Okay. And so the government asks, why are there serial numbers on firearms? And, he explains, for quality control, identification purposes, etc. Okay. And out of the 6 firearms that were found, 5 of them had the serial numbers on them, and 5 of them had the serial numbers on them, and 1 of them had the serial numbers scratched off. Okay. So that in itself is against the law. Okay. Somebody said all of this coming from a dude named Brother Love. That's a fact. Okay. What's up, Tasha? All right. So let's go on. So he says one of the serial numbers was scratched or filed off, either with a sanding machine or something of that nature. Okay. And they showed a photo of the safe that was in the security room. And Smizer asks, what is this? And he says it's a firearm safe. And so she's like, so what is that on top of the firearm safe? So she says, oh, that's shotgun ammunition. And there was a bunch of shotgun ammunition and a bunch of other stuff up there. So that was the end of that. Okay. So basically this witness was brought in to show that there were several firearms at the residence, and one firearm where the serial number was scratched off. So Agnifilo comes in and he says, Mr. Combs has security to protect him, right? And he says yes. And he's like, he has a security room, yes. And he says yes. And he basically said that all the guns and ammunition were found in the security room, right? And he said yes. And he's basically questioning the agent and trying to say that, we don't know if law enforcement was responsible for opening the doors and the safes, etc. Okay. And we don't. The job of the defense is to poke holes into every aspect of the prosecution's evidence. All right. So the law enforcement went in there, Homeland Security went in there, they raided the place. They want to leave room for all types of impropriety. Maybe somebody put something there, maybe somebody opened up a door they weren't supposed to, or whatever. Okay, so this is where he's basically going with this. So Agnifilo asks, how many search warrants have you found with Astroglide and baby oil? And he made like a huge spectacle of that. And I really, really think that he did that to sort of lessen the significance of the Astroglide and the baby oil. So, of course, the agent basically says, no, I really never had any type of, never really found anything. Like, there was no raids that I ever found like Astroglide or baby oil or anything like that. So Agnifilo says nothing further. Okay, so that was the end of him. Again, he was just there to show the prosecution put him there just to show that there were these firearms there, and there was this firearm with the scratched out serial number. And Agnifilo makes the joke about the baby oil and the Astroglide to kind of, I guess, gloss over the fact that you have a literal sawed-off weapon in the crib. Okay, so that's that. All right. There's a 15-minute break, and I noticed that there are a lot of new people in court. And there were a lot of Diddy supporters there, which I noticed that there are a lot of them just in general, but today it seemed like there was a whole lot of them. Like people who, it seemed like there were people there who like really like knew him personally. And I thought that was interesting. So now it's they're back from the break and everything like that, and the government is asking for an immunity order. Okay, so basically the next witness that is on the stand is someone who was a previous assistant to Diddy. Okay, and they're asking for an immunity order for this individual because some of the stuff that he is about to testify about could potentially incriminate him. All right, so she asks, what's your name? And he gives his name, Jonathan Martinez. And she asks, do you have legal counsel? He says yes. And she basically asks him if you intend to be honest with your testimony here today. And do you understand that your immunity order is not going to protect you from perjury? And he says yes. Okay. So, okay, James. Okay, so this is the thing. So he leaves the stand. Okay. Maureen Comey basically talks to the judge and lets the judge know, because remember, the judge had given an admonition to Diddy that he wasn't supposed to be up there nodding and whatnot. Okay. And I'm going to say this. I understand that there's a difference between nodding in agreement to something and aggressively nodding and looking at the jury and stuff like that. And this is basically what the judge said. So Comey tells the judge, look, he's still nodding. And even if he's not looking directly at the jury, nodding emphatically is not allowed. So Brian still gets up and he's just like, look, Sean Combs has been nothing but respectful. He's been warned before. He hasn't done what he, hasn't done that anymore, like looking at the jury, nodding and doing all that stuff like that. And he's been nothing but respectful. And the judge basically says, look, it's impossible to police every reaction. And he says, look, I've been clear about, how I feel about him nodding and stuff like that. And he says, if anything else arises, he'll basically address it. Okay. So that's what happened with that. So we're on a bit of a break now. The court officers are telling everybody to be quiet. I told you before in other lives, there are certain like court officers who really just be doing the absolute most. And the court officers who were in the courtroom today were doing the absolute most. Okay. Like when I tell you they were dragging it, they were really, really dragging it. Anyway, child, at this moment, Nicole Westmoreland comes into the courtroom because every time the door opens, we all turn around to see who comes in. So remember, we're in an overflow room. So Nicole Westmoreland comes in and she kind of looks around and counts and looks and sees who's in there. And there was another gentleman, a well-dressed black gentleman with her. And we're just like, what are you looking in here for? So then after a while, everybody's looking around like, what's going on? Like, what is she looking in here for? Like, and then there's like all this chatter. Kanye West was in the building. Kanye West was in the building. That's why she was coming in to look and see who was in there. Kanye West was in the building. So it was a huge, big thing. They thought that Kanye West was going to come into our overflow room. Okay. I don't think, at first we thought he was going to come into our overflow room too, because what happened was there was a gentleman who was sitting in the back row. So they made him get up and move because Kanye West was going to sit in his chair. But I guess Kanye West ended up going into a different overflow room. Okay. I can't 100% vouch for this because I did not see him in that overflow room. I do know 100% he was in the courtroom and was supposed to come in our room. And it is alleged that he was in another overflow room. So we're on the 24th floor. The main courtroom is on the 26th floor. And the second overflow room that Kanye West was supposed to go into was on the 23rd floor. Okay. I may need to grab a charger for my laptop. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds because it's saying that it's on power saving or whatever. And I don't want this to turn off. Okay. All right. So after all of that business, blah, 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 all of that calmed down or whatever. And the government called Jonathan Perez. Okay. So he's a 35-year-old who used to work at Combs Enterprises, and he used to be Diddy's personal assistant. So they show, the usual photo of Diddy. Do you know who this is? Yes, we know it's Diddy, blah, blah, blah. When did you work for him? 2021 to 2024. So how he got the job was Christina Coram actually reached out to him because he had an interview a few years prior and didn't get hired. But Christina Coram reached out to him and said, hey, look, we're looking for another assistant. Would you be interested in the position? And he said, yes. So they showed a photo of Christina Coram. I'm going to say this right now. I was under the impression, and, I'm wrong about stuff sometimes. And this is definitely one thing that I was wrong about. I was under the impression that, considering the fact that Christina Coram was shown in so many exhibits and they talked about her so often, that she was going to definitely be, testifying for the prosecution. And it looks like I'm wrong. The prosecution is saying that they're going to conclude their case sometime next week, either Wednesday or Friday. I think it's Thursday. I think Thursday's a holiday. Is Thursday some type of a holiday? I'm not sure. But there's no way that they can have Christina Coram on the stand. And so no preferential treatment for him. So let me know who you're talking about, TG, as far as preferential treatment. Okay. If you're watching on TikTok, please give me a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, please give me a follow and share. And if you're watching on Facebook, please share in real time. All right. So I was under the impression that Christina Coram was going to be testifying. I don't think she's going to be testifying because she's somebody who would have to be on the stand for at least, you saw how long Jane was on the stand for. Jane was on the stand for 4 days or something like that, 5 days, whatever it was. So if Christina Coram was on the stand, she would have to be on the stand probably even longer than that. So I don't think they're going to call Christina Coram. And I just don't know why. Why wouldn't they call her? I just don't understand why they wouldn't call her. I don't know why they wouldn't call her. Did they give her a subpoena and she just was like, nah, I'm not going to do it? Is she just like, nah, I refuse to testify against my, my friend Diddy? I don't know what is happening there. I don't know if she's going to testify for the defense. How would that work? I don't know if she would open us up. I don't know why she wouldn't be testifying. I just don't know why. But that's that. I don't think she's testifying. So, all right. So anyway, so I'm still waiting. Oh, yay. No preferential treatment for him. And I'm going to tell you the reason why I don't think there was any preferential treatment for Ye. Because first of all, if he were to walk into the main courtroom, it would cause a huge disruption. And then the other thing is you got to be on the list. You got to be on the list to be in that main courtroom, or you have to be there, or have a line holder for you, or be part of the press or whatever, mad early in the morning. The first day I went to the Diddy trial was the day that Cassie was going to testify. And I got there at 2 a.m. in the morning. And there were 55 people in front of me. I got there at 2 a.m. Armand Wiggins, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's a YouTuber. He actually showed up about 15 minutes after me, and he was after me on the line. But he actually ended up getting further up into the line because someone kind of hooked him up. And it was really nice of the person. They kind of like, he had seen that person before, and the person was like, hey, my nephew's here and he's going to go home so you can take his spot. So Armand Wiggins, that particular day got to go in the main courtroom. And from what I understand, he's been in the main courtroom several times. Not every time, because I have seen him in the overflow room with me several times since then, but he has been in the main room a lot. Okay. So that being said, no, it doesn't matter that Ye is Ye. There's no way that he was just going to just roll up into the main courtroom. Absolutely not. No matter who he was. So that was that. So Christina Corum said, okay, great. So you're looking for work. Great. Why don't you come and work and do like a little 1 week trial and let's see how it goes. So he did. He did the 1 week trial and everything worked out really, really well. And Christina Corum was like, would you like to work full time, and do this? And he said yes. He was very, very happy. He needed work. And, he basically said that he was responsible for doing research and prep for the day. Where is Diddy going this day? What does he need? Is he going to whatever show, blah, blah, blah. You know what it is with personal assistants. Okay. So he made sure that, the houses had everything they needed. And, the homes were in LA and Miami at the time. And he just, made sure everything was the way it was supposed to be. She asked him how much money he was making. And he said he was making about $85K to $100K per year. So after this, they showed a photo of somebody by the name of either Hines or Pines. I couldn't understand the exact pronunciation, but this was apparently somebody who used to buy trees from. Okay. And they showed photos of people by the name of Frankie, Joey, Brendan Paul, remember that name, and Frank Rodriguez. Okay. Frank Rodriguez was responsible for food and beverages. And as you know, Brendan Paul was one of the people who was apprehended at the airport. Remember when Diddy was arrested at the airport and he had his mule with him? Brendan Paul is the mule, okay? And so they asked, who was his security? Someone by the name of Fahim Muhammad. I don't know if you guys have heard that name before, but he was the head of security. And they showed a photo of Fahim Muhammad. All right. And so the government asks, if you needed cash, how would you get it? So he said Fahim, and they showed another photo of somebody by the name of Jane 19, who was another member of security. And so she asks, did you know what King Night was? And he said yes. And she said, what was that? And he said, well, it was Mr. Combs going to a hotel with private time with a woman. And she shows a photo of Jane, and he says, "Do you recognize her?" And he says, "Yes." And was Jane at any King nights? And he said yes. KK would let me know, when King night was about to happen, and he would prepare with drinks, food, liquor, personal items, etc. And she asked who would book the hotels, and he said somebody by the name of Jessica Ruiz would book the hotels. Were there any nights when King nights were not in hotels? And he said yes, sometimes at Jane's residence. Okay, so remember, he's there working from 2021 to 2024, and this is the time when Jane Doe was with Diddy. Okay, and they asked, how many times did you set up for King nights? And he said approximately 5. What were some of the supplies? Honey, which is that libido thing for men. I don't know if it works for women too, child. I don't know. Lube, etc. And they showed a photo of the honey packet. All right. Does that honey packet work? Does anybody know in the comments? This is just purely out of curiosity. She asked, what type of lights did you supply? And he said red lights, and he got them from the house. Sometimes he would go to erotic stores for adult outfits and shoes and things of that nature. And would you play on the company card? He said he would pay either on the company card or cash. So they showed photos of a lot of Astroglide. Okay, I counted 16 cases of Astroglide. Okay, so apparently it was something like 800 bottles of Astroglide in these things. Okay, I used to think I was under the impression a long time ago, I really thought that there was like some type of a sex ring or something like that going on. I really did not, I couldn't fathom why somebody would need that amount of Astroglide or baby oil. But when I found out that Diddy would have the escort and whoever fill up whole like inflatable pools full of Astroglide and baby oil and stuff like that, I completely realized I was wrong in my assertion. He like literally was just using it for himself. Okay. So anyway, did the staff ever have to clean up after King nights? He said yes. It was usually very messy, and their job was to clean up before the hotel staff came, just to make it easier for the hotel staff. And we understand that when a celebrity is staying in a hotel or anything like that, when the room is real messy and real crazy looking, there's a real chance that the tabloids are going to be informed. Okay, if a major celebrity is staying at a hotel and one of the hotel workers takes a photo of the hotel room with oil and mess and maybe perhaps different bodily fluids and stuff like that, and sells it to a tabloid, it could be a real problem. So this is another reason why these assistants used to go in and clean up these rooms. All right, how long would these King nights last? And he said that it would be anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. Okay. So just from his testimony and his demeanor and the way that he was talking about everything, I could tell that he was one of the assistants that had minimal knowledge of a lot of the things that were going on. Okay. I don't think he knew about some of the other more crazy stuff that was going on. And he talked about the staff arranging for IV and other things, afterwards, to help replenish Diddy and whoever else he had involved in these, freak off hotel nights and stuff like that. So they just showed some text messages between Jonathan Perez and other assistants and stuff like that. And basically, just talking about certain things that Jane might have needed. Some of the things that Jane needed were smoothies and shakes and things like that, and outfit choices and stuff like that. I'm not going to get too much into this stuff. Other text messages talked about messages between Christina Quorum and Jonathan were how much longer before the room is done, stuff like that. Is PD at the hotel yet? Just basic text messages back and forth. So I'm pretty sure that the prosecution is just trying to, establish the type of rapport that Jonathan had with KK and the different things that they were responsible for, and also showing that this was part of their job. Part of the job was to arrange for these freak offs that had people there that were escorts that were being paid for. Okay, so this is what they're establishing here. One of the text messages was that Ricky is 40 minutes away, and they asked who's Ricky, and they said the IV guy. And another text message, Christina Korm asks, how's the cleanup going? And he's just basically like, yeah, it's going okay, you know, blah, blah, blah. There was a big thing that happened, though, because there was a video that surfaced on an iPad, okay, that belonged to Diddy. And it was a video of Jane and another man engaged in sexual activity. And Jonathan lets Sean, you know, Diddy and KK know about it. And apparently a videographer found the video, okay? Okay. So he told Christina Korm the same day. And Christina Korm says in the future reference, just tell her and she'll tell Mr. Combs, okay? Not sure why she said that, but okay. So he spoke with KK about the video again in Miami, and KK brought it up. They spoke about it, and he reiterated what he told her about the video. And apparently that conversation was being recorded. The attorney asks, did you know that you were being recorded? He says no, he did not know it was being recorded. So the audio of KK and Jonathan, they play the audio, some of the audio. So KK basically says, look, come sit on this Bosu ball. I don't know if you guys know what a Bosu ball is. It's like something that you use to work out with. It's like a half of a ball that you use to do like various exercises and stuff like that. So she says, come sit on this Bosu ball. She said, look, an outside person brought up the video, so it's out. I need to know step by step how you found it, where you were in the house, and don't leave out anything. So Jonathan goes into, you know, how he found out about the tape. He said he didn't speak to anybody. He said, well, she says, where were you when you heard about the video? And he says he was in the house, and Brendan was in the house and a couple of other people. And she said that Diddy wants to launch an investigation. So, you know, they kind of went back and forth about this whole situation. And he basically was saying that he didn't want to make it seem like it was bigger than it really, really was. I think that his impression was that it was just something that was an accident. He didn't think that it was anything nefarious with it or whatever. So it was kind of like that was the end of that, right? So they asked, did anybody else bring up the video? And he said, yes, Fahim, a few months after. And they said, did you know how Fahim knew about the video? And he said, no. Okay. I don't know. I feel like that video is going to come back up again a little bit later. So there's a break. We have a break. I went outside and went live for a little bit on TikTok and YouTube. I came back, ate my lunch. And while I was there in the hallway, Mark Agnifilo, like, I kind of like ran into him, and he came out first, and he had paperwork and stuff like that. And he looked at me. He gave me like the biggest smile, like super friendly. Like, I don't know him at all, okay, but he was really like, hi, you know, like real nice and friendly. Everyone else that came out after him was like not like that. They just weren't. They just were like just walking like, but he was just like a real friendly person, and I just noticed that. I felt like that was like really interesting. The way everybody else was just like walking past, like, you know, wouldn't make eye contact with anybody, and he like just was the exact opposite. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah. So I'm back at the inside of the courtroom, and we're back from our break. We're back from our lunch break and stuff like that. And I went up to more towards the front of where I was before, so I could look at the monitor a little bit better. And there's some people behind me talking and saying that Jane mentioned Jay-Z and Beyonce being at that freak off party in Vegas, and she didn't mention them. She didn't mention their names being there. And I thought that was so interesting. I didn't turn around and say anything because I didn't want to get involved in the conversation, but it's just like, it's just so funny how lies just begin. You know what I mean? Like, this is the thing. Don't you think if if they mentioned in court that Beyonce and Jay-Z were at an FO of any sort, don't you think it would have been on everywhere? So I just thought that was interesting. I probably should have turned around and been like, no, you're not telling the truth. But there was another person who was sitting behind me that I wasn't really too crazy about, that I had interaction with before. And I just didn't really want to have any more interactions with him. So I didn't say anything. But isn't that weird? Like, why are you lying? Like, why are you lying? Like, Beyonce and Jay-Z were not at no freak off. Anyway, child. So I'm sitting now. I'm closer to the monitor and I can really see Diddy like real clearly now. And he's wearing what looked like to be like an orange sweater and like a light colored shirt. And he's there, you know, conferring with his lawyers and stuff like that. And his mom is there, Christian is there, and Justin was there also. And I noticed that Christian had his arm around Mama Combs, right? The mother Combs. And he was basically very much hugged up with her for a large, portion of the testimony. Like he was comforting her, like very much comforting her. Now, I hadn't seen him in the courtroom in a couple of days. I haven't been there every single day. So maybe he was there, recently, like, cause I wasn't there for a couple of days, but he was very much comforting her. I don't know if today was a particularly emotional day. I feel like it was an emotional day. And I'll let you know why I believe that might have been the case. I'll let you know that after. I'm almost done here. This is not going to be a long live. But he was definitely comforting her. All right. So Jonathan Perez is back on the stand. So Smizer asks, did you receive a subpoena to be here? And he said, yes. She said, did you want to testify? And he said, no. And she said, do you understand that you can't perjure yourself? And he said, yeah, basically. So she shows a photo of the Gucci pouch and he says, what's in the pouch? And he says cocaine, ketamine, Adderall, Xanax, and Molly. So he said that Sean usually had the pouch with him. So there was a text message between somebody by the name of Rob and Jonathan. And he says, yo, will you locate his Gucci pouch? Or did you locate his Gucci pouch? And he said, yes, I located it and didn't take one Addy, LOL, right? Trying to say he didn't take one Adderall. So he said, hi, I just found items in the Balenciaga pouch that should never leave the Gucci pouch. So there was a question emoji. And then somebody else texted him back and said, oh, he probably needs it at PT, at physical therapy. It was supposed to be a joke. Okay. So this is just conversation back and forth. And they asked about Jonathan, purchasing, substances. And he said, yes, he admitted that he did. And he said that Xanax, cocaine, and Molly, and he used to purchase them from somebody by the name of Baby Girl or somebody by the name of Guido. Okay. How did you pay for these substances? Cash from the security, which was Fahim, or a cash drawer. Okay. And there's a photo of text message between Perez and Fahim. And he says, hi, Fa, Diddy just had Dante pull out 1,200. Some of it was for, he testifies that some of it was for substances and some was to get something to eat. So they show receipts for this. All right. Okay. They talk about, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a physical altercation between Diddy and also, so Juror 6 is gone. I'm going to talk about that in a quick second. Okay, Mary? Do you remember a physical altercation between Diddy and Jane at her residence, right? Where she says that he was leaning down to, I guess, do something with his shoe, and she took his head and banged it on the marble counter, and then a physical altercation ensued, okay? And you remember when Diddy said, Diddy called somebody by the name of Jonathan and was like, yo, Jonathan, let this woman know that I wasn't with no damn woman on the family trip. This is the Jonathan that he was referring to in that, altercation. Okay. So the lawyer asks if you could see Jane, and he said, yes, I could see that she was there, but her back was turned from the camera. And Sean, like I said, was asking to confirm if it was another woman who had accompanied him on that prior week. And in my head, I'm like, was there? But Jonathan said, no, there was not any female with him. So Diddy was telling the truth. Like, she was flipping out for nothing because there wasn't no other woman there. So Smizer says, has this happened before? And he said, no. And Jonathan tells KK and Fahim that Sean and, Jane were fighting, and he was getting ready to go pick him up. And they said, did you end up picking him up? And he said, no. And in the text message, he types to KK, just the normal, her being jealous and yelling at him. And eventually he did hear back from Diddy, and Diddy let him know, look, I'm okay. You don't have to come pick me up. So he didn't. Okay. So basically she asks him, why did you stop working for him? Now, mind you, when he stopped working, this was like in 2024. And this was when things were really hot, and, Diddy was everywhere. There was a lot of speculation, and the raid had already happened, and it was just getting real, real hot and crazy. Okay. So he just was like, look, I wasn't kept in the loop about a lot of stuff. I didn't know what was going on from day to day. It was just real, real crazy. And I ended up leaving. And she was like, you resigned? He said, yeah. He said, mostly, hopefully to avoid something like this. So obviously people were laughing, because that's exactly what he was trying to avoid. He didn't want to be caught in the middle of anything where he would have to be testifying to some of the stuff that he did that wasn't legal, right? So Brian Steele is cross-examining him. So he says, September 24th is when you left employment, right? He said, yes. He said, do you respect Mr. Combs? He said, yes. And then Brian Steele is asking him, do you find him intelligent, motivational? He said, yes, he is. And he said, was he ever sad occasionally? And he said, yes. He said, did you ever see him cry? And, there's an objection, blah, blah, blah. So they show him, some type of text message or documentation that refreshes his memory. And he says, did you ever see him cry? And he says, I don't really remember if I saw him cry, but I do recall him being upset about that particular thing they showed him. Okay. We don't know what it was. I'm pretty sure that Brian Steele is trying to establish that they had more of a friendship, and the things that were being done were more of a personal, matter. Like, they had a personal relationship, and he, Diddy was emotional around him. He was vulnerable around him, and allowed himself to be vulnerable and stuff like that around him. So are you going to really allow yourself to be vulnerable? Or are you going to really let your employees see you emotional and see you cry? So I'm pretty sure that's where he was going with that. Okay. So Brian still asks if he's ever seen firearms around the house and the rooms, like the bedroom, bathroom, and stuff like that. And he said no. And Brian still asks, you've worked with other celebrities? And he says yes. And he said that when you work with other celebrities, security is necessary, right? And he says yes. Now, here's the thing. Again, remember who just testified. The man from Homeland Security testified that he did see firearms in the security room, in the safe, and so on and so forth. So Brian Steele is pretty much killing two birds with one stone, because he's like, you didn't see firearms in the bathroom, and, ridiculous questions like that. And then, Diddy was, cried around you, and so far and so forth. So he asks Perez if he felt like purchasing substances and, hotel night supplies and clothing and erotic clothing and stuff like that. Did he feel like it was part of his job? And the Jonathan Martinez was just like no, like, you know. So he said, look, he said, you cleaned up the hotel because you were nice, right? And you didn't want to leave a mess for the hotel staff, right? And he says, yes. And the whole time he's asking him this, I'm thinking to myself, like, if you weren't getting paid for this, would you be cleaning up oil and secretions and fluids? But anyway, we'll keep going. So he says, you were nice and didn't want to leave a mess for the hotel staff, right? He says, yes. Was Jane willing to be there for the hotel night? And he says, yes. Okay. And then Jane didn't seem like he was upset, right? After the hotel nights and stuff like that. He said, no. He said, how much would you say percentage-wise, business or and personal? Like, so how much percentage-wise do you think was personal stuff, and how much do you think was business, you know, when you were working for him? And he said business was about 99% and personal was about 1%. So he said, KK didn't have a good relationship with Jane, did she? And he said, no. And she said, KK tried to avoid her, right? And she said, yes. So I don't know what this is about. I don't know why KK and Jane had like this bad relationship with each other. I guess we'll find out about this later. I think that Steele is trying to show that Jane was just a jealous person in general and just didn't like anybody. Okay. Hey, Tasha. Hey, Paul. Okay. Okay. So this was something that everybody kind of laughed at. So Brian Steele says, so Combs wasn't really proficient with technology, right? And Jonathan says, no, he wasn't. So he says he couldn't like connect to Bluetooth. Like he didn't know how to connect to Bluetooth. And people were like laughing at that because I didn't know that Sean Combs didn't know how to connect to Bluetooth. That's crazy to me. But I mean, you know, he's brilliant. He's very smart, whatever. But I had no idea that Diddy didn't know how to connect to like Bluetooth. That's crazy to me. All right. So that was the end of that questioning. Oh, actually, no, not the end. I'm sorry. A couple more questions. So KK Steele said that KK or Sean didn't ask you to lie or anything like that, right? And he said no. And he said, never, did you ever see Sean strike anyone? And he said no. And he said that the argument that Sean and Jane were having that night was because Jane was jealous of other women. And he said, yes. This is the reason why I said that I don't believe that Jonathan was privy to a lot of stuff, because according to testimony from other people, you know, they witnessed Diddy being violent and crazy a million times. Okay. So I just don't think that this particular assistant was privy to certain things. Okay. He knows how to connect punishers. No, oh, Paul, I'm not reading that. I already have a block on TikTok. They restricted my audience over here. So I'm talking to about maybe 7 people right now instead of like the 100 I should be talking to, but it's okay. So she says, was there a lot of jealousy between other women and Jane? And of course, you know, Smizer objects to that. So she said, was Jane a strong woman? And he says, yes. And he asks more questions along those lines, and there were several objections because he's basically trying to say that Jane was a big strapping woman who could handle herself. And this is where he was going with that. So there were objections to that. So Steele asks him if he knows whether Combs is paying for substances with personal or business money, or erotic clothing, or any supplies for like these hotel nights or anything like that. And he says, no, he does not know. So again, you know, he doesn't know if this money is coming from Diddy's personal money or if it's coming from the business money. Jonathan Martinez does not know this. Okay. So Brian Steele shows an expense reimbursement form with accompanying receipts. And there's Brian still brings up a photo of a text message with heart emojis and stuff like that. And there is an immediate objection from the prosecution because nothing is redacted in this text. And I was just about to kind of like start reading it when they objected and they took it off of the screen. So apparently there was stuff in there that the general public wasn't allowed to see. I'm assuming it had Jane's real name in there or something like that. Child, even though we already know who she is, okay? So there's a sidebar. It's a long sidebar. So they bring the exhibit back up for only him to see. We can't see it. And that was that. So now they bring up a communication between Perez and Jane. I'm sorry, that was the communication between Perez and Jane. I'm sorry. So then in the text, he's basically saying to Jane that he has everything prepared for King Night. Remember, King Night, Hotel Night, Freak Off, Wild King Nights, all of that. We already know what all that is. That's all just different names for freak offs, okay? And Jane is helping to coordinate everything, okay? So again, this is showing that Jane was, allegedly complicit, right? She wanted to do these things, and she's actually helping to facilitate the, this freak off. All right. I'm not saying I agree with anything. I'm just letting you know what the defense is trying to show here. In a separate text, Jonathan texts Jane and lets her know that the chef is preparing avocado toast with a fried egg, and Jane asks for hot tea. And all I kept thinking to myself was in that moment, because I was kind of hungry, avocado toast with a fried egg sounds delicious right now. And it's really interesting to me. I made a notation of this about how Jane gets along with Perez and not KK, right? You could make the argument that Jane is jealous of KK because of her relationship, her close relationship to Diddy, or maybe my battery is running low. Hold on a second. Hold on. Hold on. Sorry about that. Let me plug this in. So you can make the argument that Jane is jealous of. Okay, I had to plug that in. You could make the argument that Jane is jealous. Oh no. Sorry. You could make the argument that Jane is jealous of KK because of her close proximity to Diddy, or is KK jealous of Jane because there were people who, wasn't there somebody earlier on who testified that KK was basically in love with Diddy? Maybe not in the true sense of being like really in love with him, but I feel like someone testified earlier on that she did like him. I could be wrong, but anyway, child. So that was that. The court artist was there. I made a notation of this. She was there drawing him, doing her thing. I don't know if you remember, but this was like either yesterday or the day before. No, I think it was a couple of days ago. And Diddy turned around, and this is according to the court sketch artist herself, and he turned around and told her that you got me out here looking like a koala. And the court reporter went home and she thought about it, and she looked. She went home, she thought about it, and she looked, and she said, yeah, I did kind of have him looking like a koala. So that was that, okay? A lot was made of that. I don't think that Diddy was trying to intimidate the court sketch artist. I think he was just trying to be, charming and trying to be a little, funny and humorous and stuff like that, So anyway, so they talk about multiple texts between Jane and Martinez, and it's again, the same kind of thing. Hey, do you need this? I got this for you, or whatever. And they would heart each other's messages and stuff like that, basically showing that they were just cool with each other. And he was there to help her with anything that she needed. And she had a great rapport with him. This is what the defense is showing. Okay. Now, under redirect, Smizer asks, was getting things for Diddy, gathering things and getting things for these hotel nights and getting, substance, stuff like that. Were all of these things part of your job? And he said, yes. And she said, cards, flowers, gifts, all of these things. Were they part of your job? And he says, yes. And she said, who told you to set up for King nights? KK. And did you set up for King nights and all this stuff for free? And he said, no. And he said, did you set up for King nights and the freak offs and stuff on your vacation? And he said, no. And they showed that same photo of the expense reimbursement again. Okay. And, went down the line of things that had to be reimbursed. Okay. And I knew that was coming, because I don't know why Brian Steele was trying to even insinuate that this was done as a personal thing. Like, no one's cleaning up secretions and stuff after freak offs just out of the kindness of their own heart because, you're a friend of Diddy. Like, he's doing it because he was being paid to do it, period. Like, that was a weird thing that they tried to do, but I guess they got to try it, right? So it's that. So, she says, these are personal things that you did that were a part of your job, right? And he said, yes. So Brian Steele comes back and he says, did you know what money was paid for specific things? And he says, no. And that was that. Okay. So basically he tries to reiterate. He's like, you don't know what money paid for what. And he says, no, I do not know. Okay. So that was the end of that. Prosecution didn't have anything else to say. That was the end of that. And we're really at the end of testimony today. The government is asking for certain exhibits to be entered. And so I want to talk very briefly about juror number 6. Okay. I made a post on TikTok earlier today where I basically said juror number 6 is out of here. And I set that video to private for a couple of reasons. One, because there were a couple of people who commented and basically said that they're not technically gone, that the judge is going to think about it over the weekend. And that they're absolutely correct. And I don't want to be deleting anybody's comments because I'm not afraid to say that to admit when I'm wrong. But I absolutely did. I was there. Obviously, I was there and heard the judge say this. However, in my opinion, juror number 6 is out of there. Okay. But again, I did not leave that up because technically we're not going to find out 100% until Monday that the juror is going to be gone. Okay. So I put it to private, just, and then I'll take it off private once it's official. But I don't want to be posting clickbaity things that, you know what I mean? But anyway, let me get into this a little bit. Okay. So the judge gives his usual admonishments to the jury, and he's very, very explicit with what he's telling the jury. He's like, hey, when you leave out of here, don't talk about the case to anybody. If he said, I told you already to take off the notifications off of your phone. So like basically he let them know from jump, look, if you get notifications from like CNN and all these other news outlets, unsubscribe from them, take all that stuff off your phone. And he basically reiterated this stuff today. I personally believe that having this case not be sequestered is a major, terrible mistake. We only get these types of major high-profile cases once in a blue. So typically, judges don't like to have people sequestered because they're so anxious to get the hell out of there after being sequestered for maybe 1 or 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever it is, that it's like impossible to say if their, if their determination, or their the verdict is like a true accurate depiction of what they really think it should be, because people are so anxious to get out of there. But it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. And I was discussing this with someone in the courtroom. How could you avoid? You can't avoid social media. If they're going home on the train, can you avoid people having a conversation on the train? Can you avoid that? What are you going to say? La la la, I'm not listening. Like, you go home, when you come into the house, your kids are talking, or your husband is talking to somebody about it, and maybe you'll go into the house and say, "Hey, I'm here now," and they might stop talking, but it's just not realistic. And I don't know any of these jurors. I don't. But I don't think out of all of the jurors, the 12 and the 6 alternates, okay, that every single one of them is not talking about the freaking case. I refuse to believe that. I don't believe that none of them are looking at anything. And like I told somebody, no matter what side you're on, even if you're on Diddy's side and you think that, he's not necessarily innocent, but you don't think he should go to jail or whatever, because you can't possibly think he's innocent if we watched him beat someone on camera, okay? But maybe you think that he just shouldn't be going to jail. Or if you're on the other side and you think that he's guilty of everything and he should go to jail, right? Either way, legacy media, for the most part, is in the tank for the prosecution. They are. If you turn on ABC News, if you turn on CNN, if you turn on any of these mainstream media outlets, they're all pretty much depicting him in a certain way. They are. Now, when you get to other, media sources, right? Some of them may kind of lean the other way. But either way, they're influencing the jury. Either way is what I'm trying to say. So nobody on either side should want any of this. I can't believe that they're not sequestered. And at this point, I really wouldn't be surprised if there was a mistrial. I really, really believe that. Okay. That being said, the judge talks about the dismissal of juror 6, and he basically lets everybody know, look, this is up to the court. And he says the court brings up other cases. The judge brings up other cases where jurors were dismissed. Basically, he says that the government says that there's more than enough evidence to dismiss this juror. And the way that this came up was, as a result of an offhanded conversation, I think with a court officer, if I'm not mistaken. And he basically said that he moved in with his girlfriend and may stay for a couple of weeks in New Jersey. And the court asks, "Oh, are you still staying in New Jersey?" Okay, so he made this offhanded comment. So now he's questioned by the judge. Okay, so the judge asks him, now mind you, I don't know who dropped dime and even spoke about this conversation. I don't know which court officer it was. I don't know how it happened, but it was brought to someone's attention, and the judge asked him, are you still staying in New York? And he said most of the time. And he says that his kid was born in New Jersey and somehow he's in New York. But in the beginning, when they were first all questioned, right, he said he lived in New York with his fiancée and daughter. Okay, let me tell you something. One of the first questions that they ask on the form for jury duty is, where do you live and who do you live with? It's one of the first questions they ask. And the reason they ask this question is because you're supposed to live in New York. If you're going to be on this case, you got to live in New York. Okay. The judge basically talks about why they have alternate jurors on the case. Okay. Obviously, if something like this arises, they can, called one of the alternate jurors, right? And he says that changing answers and inconsistencies are very, very concerning to the court. He said that it may seem trivial, but it goes to a juror's basic qualifications to serve. Omissions or inconsistencies raise questions to whether they can be trusted to serve. Okay. And he said, this is why I'm saying that the juror is going to be dismissed. So that was his decision. This is what he said. Xavier, which is the black lawyer, right? That's one of Combs's lawyers. He gets up and he, gives a vigorous, defense in for the juror. And he's just basically like, look, he doesn't think that the fact that he says he spent some time in New York and sometimes in New Jersey doesn't necessarily mean that he's lying. And he says that he thinks that he should be given the opportunity to explain. And he says, look, these jurors have been here for 5 weeks. They've been awake. And he said most of the time, people kind of laughed at that because, child, there have been a couple of the jurors that fell asleep, okay, as well as a lot of people in the courtroom. Some of that testimony is very boring. But he said that he's concerned that the court is confusing inconsistencies with lying. He said if you bring him out here and ask these questions outside of his employment, his answers would be different. Now, what he's trying to say is, he most likely works, in one state, and then, he has to go to another state for what, in Jersey for another reason, and blah, 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 this and forth, back and forth, or whatever. Okay. He says, I've been working here for 25 years, basically working in this, doing what he's doing for 25 years. And this is the first time we've had this type of diverse jury. Okay. And he said, so in my mind, I said, okay, well then just replace him with another black juror since it's all about him being black. Right. But I don't really believe that, honestly. You should put the juror that you think should be there. Right. So, I don't know who the other alternates are. Okay. I did not know at the time who the other alternates are. Okay. I found out later, and I'll let you guys know in a second. So the judge says, look, where do you live and who do you live with are simple questions. Shanoa, where do you live? I live in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Who lives with you? My granddaughter and my daughter. Like, what that's what is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, do I go visit, a friend or such and such here and there, back and forth a little bit or whatever? Yeah, but bitch, I live in fucking Brooklyn. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's it. That's the answer. That is the answer. Okay. So he said that the juror initially said that he moved to New Jersey and later lived in New Jersey. And the court asked, well, where was he living previously? He said the Bronx. And he said, look, it's basically looking like he wants to be on the jury. He said that's why there were specific questions about where he lived very early on. Where do you live? I live in the Bronx. That's it. Bringing him back might help with the inconsistencies, but it's not going to rectify why he wasn't truthful in the first place. This is what the judge is saying out of his mouth. Okay. And he said, we have a diverse jury and that will continue to be the case. And he said, we don't want a juror with an agenda. And if the integrity of the process is compromised, that would break my initial promise to the jury. And in the beginning, his promise to the jury was that it was going to be fair. It was. And one thing I will say about this judge is he has a ton of respect for the jury. Anytime he addresses the jury, he's very, very jovial, very upbeat, very positive, and gracious and thankful to them for them doing what they're doing, because it's a sacrifice, right? What do you get, $40 a day to serve on the damn jury? Okay. So, he's extremely respectful to the jury, and he is taking this entire process very seriously. So I think he was very, very upset, very, very upset with this juror, in my opinion. Okay. Xavier gets back up again and he says, look, this will not be as diverse of a jury as it was before. And he says he doesn't play the race card unless it's in his hand. Okay. So he's really, really trying to get this guy back on the jury. So Mark Agnifilo gets up now and he says, look, there are differences between principal and alternate jurors. Okay. And the defendant has a right to a jury of his or her choosing. And I will agree with him on that point. Okay. There is a difference, in my opinion, between a principal and an alternate juror. A principal juror knows in their head 1,000% that they're going to be determining the outcome of this case. An alternate juror, not so much. Maybe they're thinking in their head like, oh, I'm just sitting here going through the motions, child. I'm not even going to be, deliberating on this or whatever. So there is a difference. There absolutely is a difference. Okay. But at the end of the day, those alternate jurors are sitting there, and we can't say with, certainty, right, that all of the alternates or even any of the alternates. I mean, I'm saying this. I think that there's a chance that there is a difference, but we don't know which alternate jurors are feeling that way. We just don't know. But at the end of the day, they all are sitting there, and they all are listening. And it is what it is. Okay. I'm gonna read this, and I'm gonna say one more thing. So Brian still gets up and he says it's important for the court to consider all information that the court based is important for the court to consider that all information that the court based their opinion on was discovered in voir dire. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he says, basically saying everybody knew about all of this before and no one chose to strike this juror before. And he says this is setting a bad precedent. And I was thinking to myself, like, that didn't really make any sense because, like, if anybody knew that he was shuffling back and forth or any of this, like, these problems arose prior to them determining who was going to be on the jury, like, he wouldn't have made it onto the jury. So I was just like, is that true? I wasn't there for jury selection, so I couldn't say if that was true. I came when Cassie testified. That was my first day being there in the court. So I wasn't there for jury selection. So I was just like, wow, is that true? And then the judge basically answered my question and he was like, I'm not sure what you're talking about because this is info that came to light this week. Okay. The juror's explanation states that this stuff happened before all of that. Okay. I'm sorry, this stuff happened after all of that. Okay. And he basically said that a lot of time was spent on the questionnaire. And, we have to have respect for that and take this very, very seriously. He says that there, questions are there for a reason on this questionnaire. And that was that. And he said, thanks for the issue that you raised. Okay. And the prosecutor, Smizer, gets up and she says, look, I just want this on the record. Nobody in the government knew anything about the juror living anywhere other than where they said they did. So the fact that Brian Steele tried to get up there and, front like, oh, people knew about this. And now there's just like, no, honey, none of that was true. Okay. So the judge said, look, thank you, for the issues and stuff like that. I'm going to think about it and then I'll let you know if anything changes. That's what he said. Okay. If anything changes, I'll let you know. Juror number 6 is gone. Okay. This is my opinion, but like I said, I took down the TikTok video because it's, not 100%, accurate, because he said, if anything changes, I'll let you know. And, everyone is assuming that Monday is when we'll get complete, confirmation that juror number 6 is gone. But I don't know. Leave in the comments. Do you think that, you said you would be asleep? I was getting 20 extra for every skeet. Like, what the F? I would be asleep. Yeah. Juror number 6. I just said what juror number 6 did. I explained. I hope you listened to what I said because I spent a long time explaining exactly what juror number 6 did. Okay, so you can go back and look at the live um, once I end the live. But yeah, so that was that. So you let me know in on the comments on TikTok. Do you think that they're gonna let juror number 6 back after everything that happened, after what the judge said? Juror number 6 is out of here. Once we find out that he's out of here for sure, I'll take the video that I put on TikTok. I'll change it back to public from private, and that's that. Okay. Yeah, he's gone. There's no way he's gone. There's no way he's letting him back up there. And I'm gonna say this. Okay, I'm gonna say this. Um, I don't believe that, even though I have my own thoughts as to whether I believe, Diddy deserves what's happening to him and stuff like that. I believe in fairness. At any given time, it could be one of us having to face, 12 uh, people of our, peers or whatever. And we want things to be as fair as possible. Okay. If you're there, basically, going back and forth between, oh, I live here, I live there, the judge made it clear he was asked 3 separate times where he lived. And the first time he gave one answer, the second time he was asked, he gave a second answer. And the third time he was asked, he gave a different answer. It's a very straightforward question. And it definitely is giving that he went, oh, let me tell you one more thing before I leave. So I spoke with someone who is in the main courtroom every single day. Okay. And I know they're in the main courtroom every single day because I know they are, like, they're there in the main courtroom. I was actually surprised to see him in the overflow room today. He said he just wanted a little bit of a break from that room today for whatever reason. Okay. So maybe he wanted to see what the vibe was like in the overflow room. I don't know. But he was sitting right next to me, and he said that that particular juror was absolutely pro Diddy. There are a couple of jurors who have made grimaces and, made faces and stuff like that throughout different types of testimony. And he said that that particular juror was absolutely pro Diddy. Now, here's the thing. Do I think that the prosecution knows that? Absolutely. The same way Diddy has somebody who's up there looking at the jury, the prosecution has somebody up there looking at the jury. Because remember, the same way Diddy has unlimited resources, the government has unlimited resources. Unlimited resources. So they can pay somebody a whole lot of money to just sit up there and look at the jury the same way that Diddy's team is looking. This is why Diddy's team is fighting so hard. Why do you think Diddy's team fighting so hard for him? Why do you think they're fighting so hard for him? You think they're going to fight for somebody who they don't think is on their side? Come on. Let's be real here, okay? So take with that info what you will, okay? And that's that. I am going to end this live now. I'm going to go live tomorrow, and we're going to discuss this. Like, we got to discuss this more. I want to discuss other things about this case, and I just want to discuss other things. So I'm going to be going live again tomorrow. I have some things to do tomorrow, but I'm definitely going to go live for a little bit. I want to thank everybody who's left on TikTok. I'm so annoyed at TikTok for restricting my live. Like, I just got to be real careful. I was able to go live, like, I think it was yesterday or whatever. Paul, you said to call you. It's 10:36. I'm not calling you at this time. I'm going to sleep. Okay. We're going to have to talk tomorrow. All right. Or come over. What's today? Friday? Come over like for Sunday. Well, come over tomorrow night for until Sunday. What was I going to say? Yeah. So I will see you guys in the next one. Okay. I was able to stay live. That's what I'm going to say. I was able to stay live for the entirety of the live. I think it was because I mentioned firearm or something like that. And I think that triggered it. So, but anyway, I'll get better at this. Please follow me on TikTok, and I will see you guys in the next one. Ooh, there we go. And thank you very much, everybody over here on Facebook. Please follow me at Shanoa Can Talk on YouTube. I'm trying to get to 1K. Okay. My short-term goal is 100. I'm at 68 right now. So I'm trying to get to 100. That's the short-term goal. The long-term goal is 1K, right? So that's Shanoa Can Talk. That's on YouTube. So give me a follow over there. And I am on TikTok at Shanoa Can Cook. All right. So I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much, everybody. Talk to you later.